Hi everyone, my name is Tom Pettit and welcome to this week's episode of Beyond Come Follow Me. This week in your Come Follow Me lessons, you are looking at the doctrine that is contained in the book of Esther from the Old Testament. And for a few minutes now, I'd like to share with you just a basic outline of what's going on in this book and of course how we can relate it to our lives. And then as I always do, conclude it with a story from church history that really relates to the things that we're talking about this week in our Come Follow Me lessons. So to get right off to it, Esther, she's a big-time hero of the Old Testament. Now, in past videos, I've really highlighted some of the women that are mentioned in the Old Testament and talk about the extraordinary missions that they accomplished for the benefit of the Lord's work. And here we've got another great example in Esther. Esther, we don't know too much about her, but the story that we do know, it proves that she's an incredible person. She's, as you'll see as you read through these chapters and as I explain it just over the next few minutes, Esther is utilized by the Lord to save the house of Israel from extinction. And maybe not all of the house of Israel, because obviously it's been scattered to this point, but most certainly and specifically the house of Judah, or the tribe of Judah, who are the Jews. So she's going to save them from complete extinction. So here's how the story goes. Esther is of the house of Judah. It makes her a Jew, as they're referred to in the book of Esther. And she's living with a man by the name of Mordecai. She gets adopted by him. Now, if you look at the genealogy, Mordecai is her cousin. So it must have been an older cousin that was taking care of her kind of as an adopted father would take care of someone. And at this same time, the king of the area, the king that's taken the Jews into captivity, he divorces his wife. The reason he divorces his wife is because he brings all of his friends over and his political allies and people he wants to impress, I guess, and he asks his wife to go and kind of parade herself around so that he can show off his beautiful wife to all those people who he wants to have influence with. Well, she refuses to do that. And because of that, he divorces her. So she gets set aside. Now the king needs a new wife, and he goes looking out for a wife. And Esther, because of her great beauty, becomes the king's new wife. So we've got her now in quite a position, being the queen of the area, and she's obtained that status, if you will. At the same time, there's another man, and he's pretty high up the hierarchy with the king as far as the being a king's man or somebody high in the king's court. And he and Mordecai don't like each other. And this guy, he really doesn't like Mordecai, so much so that he writes out a decree saying that everybody from the tribe of Judah, all the Jews, are going to be put to death. Of course, Mordecai hears about this as well as the other Jews, and this causes a lot of problems. They're about to be put to death. We've got an extermination order against the Jews. And he says, I kind of chuckle at that because our church history had an extermination order where the governor of Missouri signs into law an extermination order saying that the members of the church who were then living in Missouri, they had to be treated as enemies and driven from the state or exterminated. And so here we have history repeating itself again in the latter days. But in the Old Testament days, when the decree comes out that all the Jews have to die, well, what's their response? They're scared, they're worried, they're panicked, and so they start to weep and they start to mourn. And with their weeping and mourning and difficulty of life, the uncertainty, what's the one thing they do? In addition to all that panicking and the stress and the anxiety, they fast. They understand that the fasting brings them closer to the Lord. And right now they needed the Lord in their life more than any other time perhaps. They were about to lose their lives, and so they call out to the Lord, and in doing so they don't just pray to the Lord, but they couple it with fasting. And this we also see, this fasting during a time of mourning and a time of great anxiety. We also see that pattern in the Nephites. And I wonder if us as Latter-day Saints, we understand the power behind fasting. The law of the fast doesn't require, but invites us to fast for 2 meals and then donate the money that we'd saved by not purchasing food or eating the food to the church that gets distributed among those who might be in financial need. And sometimes, myself, I'll speak for just myself, sometimes I focus on, hey, I'm fasting so that I can donate this fast offering to take care of others. But in reality, that's part of the fast. A main part is, if not the part, is Heavenly Father's giving us an opportunity to petition Him in a unique way, to show Him that we really, really want and need a blessing. And this is what the Jews were doing. They were petitioning the Lord through fasting by proving to the Lord, hey, we're willing to physically sacrifice in exchange for a blessing that we seek. And so this is what they were doing. And so they go through this fasting period, and Mordecai, he sends a copy of the decree right to Esther and says, hey, you're in a position here where you can really help us out. Here's what's going to happen if you don't act. We might be destroyed. And that's the word he uses in verse 14. Now, Esther, she's in that position of influence. She's married to the king. And the king, what the king says goes. And so she definitely has an influence there. But by exerting her influence onto the king to have him reverse this decree, it comes at a great potential sacrifice. See, at this point, the king doesn't know that she's a Jew. So she's going to have to reveal her heritage in order to say, hey, save my people by reversing this decree. Was she nervous? No doubt. Was she hesitant? Obviously, by what we find in verse 14, because Mordecai has to encourage Esther a little bit. And in verse 14, he says, for if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, meaning if you don't do anything, if you keep quiet, if you just let this brush aside, then thy father's house, meaning the tribe of Judah, shall be destroyed. So Esther, I know you're nervous. I know you're scared. I know you're hesitant. But if you don't do something, the tribe of Judah is going to be wiped out. It's up to you. And then he doesn't just use that as a guilt, but he uses that as a catapult to remind her of who she really is. And he does that in the second half of verse 14. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Esther, who knows? Maybe you were born for this. Perhaps the Lord has set everything up perfectly so that you can be used as an instrument in His hands in saving the tribe of Judah. Perhaps you've been born for this moment. With that encouragement, Esther says, okay, I'm going to do it. So she gets up her courage that was influenced by Mordecai, and after being reminded of who she is, and she says, I'm going to do it at great risk to my own life, if not at least the status that I have here, being the king's wife. I'm going to go and make this attempt. But she doesn't just go and do. She prepares by asking others, the tribe of Judah, to fast on her behalf. Remember, I just briefly, very fast, mentioned that fasting has power to petition the Lord for a special blessing that we desire, that we seek. Well, Esther was probably fasting on behalf of herself, but she knew that if she had a collective faith, the collective faith of the tribe of Judah, and asked all of them to participate in a fast, this could become powerful. Perhaps you've experienced something like this in your own life, where you have participated in a family-wide fast. Sometimes we even have a ward-wide fast for people who really are in need of our faith and our prayers. And so that's just what Esther does. She says, I'm going to do it, but I can't go by myself. I need your help. I need your help, your faith. I need your fasting. And after all that we can do to petition the Lord for his help, if I perish, I perish. I'm going to do what's right, even if it comes at the sacrifice of my own life. And that's what she says in verse 16. Go, gather together all the Jews that are present, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days. Well, that's a long fasting. Night and day. I also and my maidens will fast. So I'm not just asking you to do it, tribe of Judah, but I'm going to do it too. We're all going to fast and collectively petition the Lord for help. And after we do that, and so I will go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. I'm in trouble if I do this. And if I perish, I perish. I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to prepare myself the best I can to be in the best situation possible to do what's right by asking for the Lord's help. And after all I do, it's in the Lord's hand at that point. Well, she goes in, she tells the king what's going on, she reveals who she is, and the king reverses the decree. Esther saved the tribe of Judah, all the Jews, from becoming extinct. Well, the Jews celebrate Esther. They love her, and they commemorate what she did for them through a Jewish feast of Purim, Purim. It's a 2-day feast, annually celebrating Esther's bravery and their deliverance because of Esther. Now, I want to make a couple of points here related to us, and then, of course, throw in a church history story. Actually, I've got two. But first, on fasting. I focused a little bit on that, and I know that the Come Follow Me manual, it has a portion there where it talks about fasting. I found this great quote from Elder Cook that says, fasting and prayer can help develop within us courage and confidence. Does that not describe Esther right there? Everybody's fasting for her to give her courage and confidence. And that's what Elder Cook says is available to us when we fast. And so we can think, boy, what do I need courage or confidence in? Maybe take an opportunity to fast in order to gain that confidence or that courage that we seek. Elder Cook continues, when we fast, our righteous prayers and petitions have greater power. And that's why the Book of Mormon folks and the Tribe of Judah folks, they get in desperate need of help from Heavenly Father. And so what do they immediately do? They mourn, they weep. Both nations talk about doing that, but then both nations also couple that with fasting. And why? Elder Cook is just perfect on it. He says, fasting and prayer can help develop within us courage and confidence. When we fast, our righteous prayers and petitions have greater power. It's almost as though saying a prayer without fasting, Father in heaven, this is what I need, this is what I want, and these are the reasons why. But then if we were to couple that with fasting, we can then go to the Lord and say, Lord, I'm fasting for for the things that I need and want. These are the things, this is why I need and want these things. And to really show you that I really, really need your help on this, I'm physically sacrificing in exchange, hopefully, for a blessing that I seek. So how do we relate this? Well, we got two main characters, Mordecai and Esther. How do we become more like Mordecai? Mordecai was in a position where he encouraged other people, specifically Esther, to do what is right. And we have opportunities to do that as well. Certainly, none of us should ever feel like we're in a position of authority or unrighteous dominion, as the Lord describes it in Doctrine and Covenants, to where we can point out and say, hey, you need to do better, you need to do more, you need to do what's right. But we could be more like Mordecai, and where we can remind people who they are. And instead of pointing at them and saying, you need to do this, you need to do better, which is going to put them down, we can remind them of who they are. And in that way, we're actually lifting them up to do what is right. And Mordecai is a perfect example of that. he knew who Esther was. And instead of saying, Esther, you got to go to the king and you got to do this and put your own life at risk to save everybody else, he just reminded her of who she was and said, by saying, maybe the Lord's put you in position to do this. And that is what lifted Esther up. And so we can look for those opportunities to help encourage others to do what's right by not pointing at them and putting them down, but rather looking for opportunities to lift them up, really in remembrance of who they are. That's what Mordecai did. We can do that with our kids. We can do that with our grandkids, neighbors, family, friends, whatever, whoever we might have a relationship with. But here's a way that Joseph Smith did it. 3 months before Joseph Smith died, he gathers all of the members of the Quorum of the 12 into the upper room of the red brick store in Nauvoo, Illinois. And Joseph knows that his time is short. Up to this point, obviously, he's been president of the church and prophet, and the Lord's prophet. And he's had his first presidency, he's had the Quorum of the 12, but he's been the lone possessor of active keys. And you have to hold the key in order to direct the work. So if the key holder dies, who's going to direct the work? Well, the enemies of the church didn't understand this concept, this doctrinal concept of holding keys. But they figured that if Joseph dies, the church dies with him. So before Joseph passes away, he gathers the Quorum of the 12 together and he bestows upon them all the keys of the priesthood. So that when he dies, the Quorum of the 12 can move forward. Now he acted a lot like Mordecai in reminding the Quorum of the 12 who they were. So that when eventually he did die, they did rise up and they took over the leadership of the church. And the members of the church in Nauvoo knew and recognized this doctrinal concept. And so that's why they all got in line and followed Brigham 1,625 miles to the Salt Lake Valley. Had they said, no, to the mobs, no, we don't believe, Joseph Smith's dead, so the church is dead, and we're going to stay here in our beautiful home and continue to farm here in Nauvoo, the mob would have left them alone. But they didn't. They knew, they understood this doctrine of Brigham and the other members of the 12 holding the keys of the priesthood, the authority of leadership. And so they were willing to leave behind all, go out into the West, and follow the prophet, the successor to Joseph Smith. So that's kind of the stage, but let me tell you the details as recorded by Wilford Woodruff, who was there. He said, I remember the last speech that Joseph Smith ever gave us before his death. He stood upon his feet some 3 hours. The room was filled as with consuming fire. His face was as clear as amber, and he was clothed upon by the power of God. He laid before us our duty. He laid before us the fullness of this great work of God. And in his remarks he said to us, I have had sealed upon my head every key, every power, every principle of life and salvation that God has ever given to any man who ever lived upon the face of the earth. And these principles and this priesthood and power belong to this great and last dispensation, which the God of heaven has set his hand to establish in the earth. Now I have sealed upon your heads every key, every power, and every principle, which the Lord has sealed upon my head. I have lived so long up to the present time. I have been in the midst of this people, and in this great work and labor of redemption. I have desired to see this temple built, but I shall never live to see it completed. But you will. I now roll the burden and responsibility of leading this church off from my shoulders onto yours. Now round up your shoulders and stand under it like men, for the Lord is going to let me rest for a while. Like Mordecai in teaching Esther, Joseph was teaching the 12 by lifting them up after reminding them who they were. So when Joseph did pass away, Brigham and the rest of them, they didn't feel the guilt of leadership. Oh, we got to go carry the load now. It's our responsibility. The burden's laid on us. But no, Joseph taught them who they were, and so they were able to stand up and carry the burden on their shoulders willfully because of who they were, because Joseph had reminded them of that. And then we get to Esther. And how do we be more like Esther? Well, there's a ton of different ways. But let me point out just one. She, in chapter 4, the end of chapter 4, she ended up with the courage to do what is right. Even though all the circumstances around her indicated that, don't do it, Esther. Don't do it. You can have positive influence in other ways. Whatever might have been whispering in her ear, she disregarded it and she stood firm. And she said, even if I perish, even if I die, even if this doesn't turn out good, I'm still going to do what's right. And that decision, each of us as Latter-day Saints, we have that decision to make every single day. I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I'm going to choose to do the right thing. And we have that opportunity multiple times every day to have Esther-like courage to just say, I'm just going to do what's right. And the truth is that we can never be wrong as long as we're doing our best in doing what's right. I mean, how would Heavenly Father abandon us if we're doing the very best we can to do what's right? And notice I'm not saying perfect. When we do the best we can, things will generally turn out right. In fact, we can't be wrong. We can't be wrong in doing our best to do what's right. Here's what Elder Bednar says. Ordinary people who consistently do small and simple things that are right before God will bring forth extraordinary results. Here's another story from church history. Joseph Smith Sr. Joseph Smith Sr. is in Palmyra. Somebody comes to him and presents a debt, to a note of debt. Hey, Joseph Smith Sr., you owe $14. And Joseph Smith Sr. says, I can't afford that. And I don't have $14. And so the collector says, okay, you've got a choice since you can't pay it. You can either go to jail for 30 days, and it's a labor camp. You're going to do hard labor for 30 days, or you can burn this copy of the Book of Mormon and say that it's not true. And if you do that, we'll tear up the debt, and you don't have to go perform 30 days of hard labor. So what does Joseph Smith Sr. say? He says, give me my shovel. I'm going to go do the hard labor for 30 days. Because I cannot and will not ever deny that the Book of Mormon is true. So sure enough, the prophet's father goes off to debtor's jail, and he performs hard labor for 30 days. What does Elder Bednar say? I'll remind you, ordinary people who consistently do small and simple things that are right before God will bring forth extraordinary results. And in those 30 days, where Joseph Smith Sr. was working hard, he was preaching the gospel. He's digging the ditch or hauling the hay or whatever he was forced to do, and he was talking to his fellow jailmates about the restored gospel. Well, at the end of those 30 days, he ends up baptizing 2 people in jail. Joseph Smith Sr. did what was right. He didn't know how this was going to end. 30 days of hard labor, and then I'll come home and try to recover. No, the Lord had a greater purpose. Go into jail, talk to these people, share your testimony, and 2 souls will be baptized and come closer to Christ. So you never know. You never know when you do your best to do what is right, what wonderful things the Lord will bring about. That's the story of Esther, and that's the lesson for each of us to learn and understand this week as we study the chapters of Esther in our Come Follow Me lessons. And I leave this with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.